Okay, hello everybody. This is the Hangout of IIP MOOC. This is the fifth Hangout, and today we have a great pleasure to have two special speakers from the OECD. Now, OECD's office used to be only 5 minutes walk away from the IIP, but now they have recently moved to the other side.
It's still there as well.
You're still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
we
that's
have, we
half
have more
and
than
half.
one office.
Okay, so all right, now so we're still in a kind of a neighborhood. Now today, the special guest, I'm going to introduce them. Michael Ward
Hello.
is a senior policy analyst at the OECD. He's the manager of the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA for Development, PISA-D initiative. He has 30 years of field experience in education in Asia, Africa, and Latin America with OECD and development agencies. And he has published many books and papers and chapters on educational development. He has a PhD in educational development from the University of East Anglia in UK. And Miyako Ikeda, my another Japanese, is a lead analyst at the OECD. She joined the PISA team in 2004 and has been leading the analysis team since 2015. Prior to this, she used to work here at UNESCO IIP until 2004 and also worked in World Bank in Vietnam. That was between 2000 and 2002. Miyako received the Master in Sociology of Education from University of Tokyo and her doctorate from Teachers College, Columbia University, where she also worked as a visiting scholar until last year. So the structure is going to be as follows. First of all, I'm going to ask Miyako some questions about PISA, which is a program that is going on at the OECD since 2000. And then after that, I will ask more questions specifically about PISA for development. Now, as you know, dear participants, these questions were compiled based on your input. So first of all, thank you very much for your input and all the questions. And I hope that you will enjoy this session. So Miyako, first of all, the general question, let me ask you, please briefly describe OECD PISA, all right? It's particularly because in this course, we have been looking at what are the differences between the assessments, and in terms of the PISA, we also talked about the specificity about the target population. So they know, everybody knows about the different ways of defining the target population in PISA, as well as defining the test framework, which is really different from all the other assessments. But can you just, go through that briefly, first of all?
Thank you, Miyako. PISA was launched in 1997 in response to the country's request to measure educational outcome. And when you measure educational outcome, you have to think about what do we want to measure at what level. And then PISA decided to measure it at the age of 15, which is near the end of compulsory education. And what do we want to measure? PISA countries get together, and also experts are involved in, and we discuss and decided what we want to measure is not what student can replicate the knowledge. That is also important, but not only that, but also what students can do with what they have learned in and out of school in the real life context. That's why PISA is measuring wide range of competencies, including the cross-curricular competence such as problem solving, in addition to reading, mathematics, and science.
Okay, thank you. So that's actually related to the way you define the target population and why you are defining the test framework, because that's based on the link between what they can do with what they know, and therefore you are concentrating on the adult, not the school-based curriculum and the grades that are also kind of a school and then structure-based. Yeah.
We are focusing on the key competencies, which are essential for the student or 15 years old in future to be able to fully participate in the modern societies.
Yeah, so that's the reason for that. Now,
You should make it clear that PISA is focused on 3 domains of learning: reading, mathematics, and science.
yeah, reading, mathematics, and science, and we'll come back to the question later on about other learning domains that PISA did very recently. Now, next question is about the participation by the middle income countries that have been going on. Also, there is a link between other questions that I'm going to ask to Michael later on, but there have been some already, middle income countries that have participated in PISA. So what did you learn? What is the experience? For example, some countries may not have enough information about what the countries can do if they were categorized as a kind of a below the first level. And at the same time, there's other countries like Vietnam who participated in 2012, and their achievement was really good, and everybody was happy. And then some people are criticizing that maybe that's because only the elite people were participating in the PISA. So can you have something on that?
There are many things we learn from them, but first thing is there's so much variation even among those countries in terms of achievement level. And certain countries achieve very high, certain countries achieve low, even though their income level is similar. And for example, we did a system level correlation to see that across 75 countries, what are the correlation between GDP per capita and mathematics performance in 2012, and then only 20% of variation in mathematics score can be explained by GDP per capita, which means that 80% of variation is not to do with the income level. So you talked about Vietnam. Vietnam is a very interesting case. Vietnam's GDP per capita is among the lowest among OECD PISA participated countries' economies, but their performance is above OECD average, similar to like Canada or Australia. So it's very outlier in terms of the GDP per capita and performance. And then again, we have to look into the result very carefully. Who are these 15 years old we are measuring? Because PISA's target population is 15 years old in school, either at grade 7 or above. So that if the 15 years old are not in school, those 15 years old are not a target population for PISA.
Okay.
And if they are below grade 7, we don't cover them either.
Right.
And then about 60% of 15 years old with Vietnam are at grade 7 or above in school. So other 40% we are not measuring.
Not measuring. Okay, so if we are to measure those 40% who are not measured, we may have different results.
Yes, we may have different results, and we don't know yet.
Okay, we don't know yet.
Can I say the experience of the middle-income countries in PISA is something we have studied as part of the preparation of PISA for development. And towards the end of last year, we published a major report on the experiences of middle-income countries in PISA. This was something we commissioned from Marlene Lockheed, who is a very senior education researcher at Princeton. Formerly, she was the head of education at the World Bank. So we published this report last year. It's available on our PISA for Development website, and I would really encourage people watching this to go to the website, and you can download a free copy of that report electronically. What that report tells us is that it describes the motivations for middle-income countries to come into PISA. And the strong motivation is that countries really do want to benchmark their systems internationally. That is a very powerful driver. They want to be part of the international community around PISA that is focused on learning outcomes and improving learning outcomes. They also seek to gain access to assessment experts. What Miyako was saying is that PISA is not just about the OECD, of course, it's about the countries and literally hundreds of experts that come together to review frameworks, develop items, produce the tests, and then implement PISA. And so a strong motivation for the middle-income countries to come in is to gain access to that. The report also looked at the results of the countries in PISA, and Miyako is saying that there is a lot of variation, but I think we have to say that generally the lower income countries perform at lower levels generally compared to the OECD average. And so in developing PISA for development, we have taken that very much on board. We also looked at the experience of the low-income countries that have been in PISA, so Kyrgyzstan, the 2 states of India that took part in 2009. And so one of the big enhancements that we are making as part of PISA for development is to target the tests, the reading, the maths, and the science tests, to target those tests on the lower levels of performance. So PISA has 6 levels of proficiency. The baseline level proficiency is level 2. So in PISA today, I think about 21%, 22% of the items used in PISA are at level 2 and below, 22%. So not even a quarter. In the PISA for development test, there are 65% of the items targeted at level 2 and below. And so that's a huge difference between PISA and PISA for development. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we want to be able to discriminate or to expand our analysis of the lower performing students by increasing the range of items at that lower level. But of course, we still have 35% of the items in PISA development that are at the higher levels. So if there is a student in a PISA for development country able to perform at those high levels, they'll still be able to show
the link.
That's right. But our main aim is to increase that focus and to be able to discriminate at those lower levels. The other experience of the middle income countries in PISA that we've really taken on board is that, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this soon, in the OECD countries, we talk about something called Pisa Shock. That the results of PISA have been picked up by media, by different actors in the sector, and this has, caused governments to reflect on why are our scores the way they are. When we look at the middle income countries, we don't see the same shock. We see, and this could be because the media in those countries is not attuned in the same way to these kinds of issues. There could be lots of explanations. So what we're trying to do in PISA for development to address this is to help the countries not only to simply implement the test and get the results, but to understand what those results mean, and to, in many ways, educate the populations in those countries, the media in those countries, the academics in those countries, for how they can respond to PISA results and use them for national policy dialogue and ultimately for decision making in terms of the education sector.
Okay. In order for the result of this PISA-D data collection is more useful for the countries, the background questionnaire have to be matched to the socioeconomic and cultural context of the country. And middle-income countries now, they have such a diverse context, so that one of the PISA-D for development strength is focusing on the questionnaire, background questionnaire, and then try to adapt to the countries.
Yeah, I remember the conversation that we had a long time ago about the kind of questions that, for example, SACMEC assessment is using in order to define the socioeconomic level. If you look at very carefully each of the item level, the kinds of items that were used are different from what you have been using in the PISA questionnaire.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting.
So maybe I could say now, another thing we have done to prepare PISA for development is to review the experiences of all the other international large-scale assessments. So another major report that we published last year was a review of the experiences of all the international large-scale
And
assessments.
the regional.
Including SACMEC, including PASEC, including
Okay.
LESE, including PEARLS and TIMS, all of the assessment programs that are working with developing countries. So this report was published in November, and UNESCO kindly gave us the platform to launch it at the NECMAP meeting in Bangkok. I think it was December, it might have been November. And again, anybody watching this, if you're interested, please go onto our website. You can download the report, and it is the most comprehensive assessment of large-scale assessments there is. There's nothing more than that. And as Miyako says, we have developed the background questionnaires as well as the test for PISA development, and we have, we're not ashamed of this, we have borrowed very heavily from SACMEC, from PASEC, and also from the Indian community-based assessment ASA. And the managers of ASA, the managers of SACMEC, the managers of PASEC, the managers of LESE have all been very generous in helping us to understand their lessons and experience, and they are all reflected in PISA for Development. So the PISA for Development questionnaires include about 50% of items from PISA, and that's very important so that we can link to the PISA scale. But then another 25% of the items are those we have taken from SACMEC, from PASEC, from LESE, from ASA, from these others. And then 25, the last 25%, the last quarter, are items that we've developed specially with the countries we're working with for PISA for Development. And then just to come back on your last point about you know, the PISA target grades, grade 7 and above, and how in Vietnam's case that actually represents only barely 60% of the population of 15-year-olds. And we can talk about Brazil, where it's barely 75%, and Turkey, where it's, I don't think, more than 70%. So to address this, because when we look at the developing countries, and certainly the ones we're working with, at the age of 15, we find that only about 1/3, 33, 35% of 15-year-olds are in grade 7 and above. Then there is another third, 33, 35% of the 15-year-olds. They are in school, but they are in grades below grade 7. So they are probably still in primary school. And then we have a third that are out of the system altogether. So that third that are out of the system, they may have never enrolled. They may have enrolled in primary and dropped out after 2 or 3 grades. They may have completed primary and never made the transition to lower secondary. They may have made the transition to lower secondary but then dropped out. So in PISA for Development, we are including all of that population. So the 15-year-olds in grade 6 and below, and the 15-year-olds who are out of the system altogether, and we will be assessing the skills and competencies of those two populations as well with a special test of reading and mathematics. And this is a shorter test than the test that will be administered in the schools, although those 15-year-olds who are in grade 6 and below will be tested in the school, but using this shorter test. And we'll be also delivering a shorter background questionnaire, which is very much tailored to the particular situation that these 15-year-olds are in. Either they're out of school or they're in primary school. And this, I think, is the first attempt of any assessment, large-scale assessment, to do this. So we are breaking very new ground, and we are using highly innovative approaches to do this. And we have our fingers crossed that we can make it work, because as I say, the PISA for Development test for the grade 7 and above is targeted on those lower levels of performance. The test that we're using for the out of school is targeted on the lower levels of the lower levels of the lower levels of the performance, so that we can get a good understanding of what these kids can do. We don't want to find a 15-year-old in a household in rural Zambia, and having taken all that effort to find that 15-year-old to go into the household, to then confront the 15-year-old with a test that cannot be
Yeah.
answered. That is not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
The philosophy behind PISA for Development is we want to measure the learning of students where they are, not
what they can do.
what they can
Yeah.
do, not what we would like them to be able to do, not what the OECD average is, but where are they? At what level of learning are they? How can we understand that? So obviously, if you give a child a test that they simply cannot answer, firstly, that is, I think, ethically irresponsible to put a child through something that they can't do. But secondly, we learn nothing from that. So this is our challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, definitely. Now, you were already answering some of the questions. The interesting question that I was going to ask you later on. But this is good. This is good. Very, improvisational. As yeah. Now, going back to the PISA 2015, which we still don't have the results, right? The result will be coming out at the end of
December 6th.
December, that's right.
But
now,
not all of the result, part of the result.
Part of the result, okay. Right. Something that is interesting that we heard from Patrick Griffin yesterday when he was the speaker for the Hangout yesterday, is that PISA 2015 actually used something called collaborative problem solving, yeah, which is one of the 21st century skills, right? There are different things, collaboration or understanding of others, or learning to learn, the metacognition, etc., etc. There are many things defined, but then that was used. And that was actually used in the environment where the students would be ticking some multiple questions, right? In order to test something about the collaborative problem-solving skills. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes. So in addition to the core competency in reading and mathematics and science, PISA introduced the innovative domain, because more and more other competencies are getting very important in this 21st century, including the collaboration and creativity and all these other skills. And the PISA Governing Board, which is the gathering of the representatives from the countries, they decided that they want to measure collaborative problem-solving skill of 15 years old in 2015. And 2003, by the way, PISA Governing Board decided to measure problem-solving skill. In 2012, we repeated that, but with the computer-based problem-solving. In 2015, we moved on to the computer-based collaborative problem-solving assessment. And as you said, that this is not the human-to-human collaboration, but human and computer. So the student have to interact with the agent, which is generated by the computer. So you interact the person, but not the real person, but it's generated by the computer, and then answer the question.
Interesting. We look forward to seeing that results. Now, there is something about the notion of the assessment as a public good. Okay, these questions actually came from the inputs from our participants, and then some of them were asking about the fact that there was the recommendations made by the Learning Metrics Task Force saying that assessment should be public good. So how can this be achieved within this PISA environment? There's a very high cost for the country's participation. I guess we first of all, how much would that cost?
I don't think the cost.
You don't think the cost is no?
If you look at the report that I just mentioned on the experience of middle-income countries, we look at the costs of participating in PISA for about 15 middle-income countries, and we compare it to the amount of money they are spending on their secondary education systems over that cycle. And we find that in the case of Brazil, the cost of its participation in PISA is equivalent to 0.05% of its expenditure on the secondary education system. So less than 1%, barely a fraction of 1%. So the cost of participating in PISA, the cost of participating in TIMSS and PEARLS is infinitesimally tiny. So, you know, I think we have to take perspective into account when we talk about costs. And so, you know, when we talk about this being a public good, can it be much cheaper than 0.05% of what a country is already spending on its education system?
Can that be cheaper?
Yeah, I suppose it could be zero, but I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch, I guess.
Right. Okay.
Now I talk about access to the instrument and data. In PISA, everything is available without any fee. So that the researcher or government official or teachers or even the student, if not somebody is interested in PISA result, or somebody who are watching this, can go to PISA website and can download the PISA data and the PISA questionnaires and PISA some of the test items. Here is a little bit, but we have to take the balance between the transparency and the keeping some item to measure the trend. Because in order to measure the trend, we have to use the same items, so that those items we cannot disclose. Those items we don't make it public. But other than that, we try to be transparent as possible, and then make all the methodology available in the technical report. And then every single PISA report are available on the PISA website without any fee.
Yeah, that's an important point. I think all of the assessment programs, including IEA studies and then all the other regional assessment, do exactly the same thing, which is to have some items in public, available for the public, but always have to keep many of the items in a kind of a hidden item bank, so that can be used in order to monitor the change in other studies.
Also, we are spending a little more effort to facilitate the analysis. So there's some analytical tool available on the website, so that those people who cannot use the SAS or Stata or SPSS, but still can go to the website, and just by clicking and then selecting a country name or variable name, you can get the result.
Okay, great. We should probably put that on our platform. All right. Now, Michael, you have already explained a little bit about why PISA for development, right? Are there any other things?
I think there are three main drivers of PISA for development. The first one we've already talked about, that more and more middle-income countries and low-income countries are coming into PISA, and we're getting a lot of requests from developing countries to come into PISA. So there is a demand driver. And at the same time, as I was saying, we did a review of the experience of the middle-income countries, and we could see that they faced certain challenges in implementing PISA, and clearly they were not making as much use of the results of PISA as the OECD countries were. And as we said earlier, there are lots of reasons for that. Then the second driver is that the OECD itself, the meeting of the Council of Ministers of the OECD in 2012, approved and put in place an OECD strategy on development. And this was a very big statement by the OECD, and was really part of the move towards the post-2015 agenda. And a big part of that strategy on development is taking the best of the OECD policy instruments and adapting them for the use of developing countries, making available to the developing countries the policy instruments and the approaches that the OECD countries are using for the benefit of the developing countries. And then the third driver is the post-2015 agenda itself. And now with the Sustainable Development Goals in place, goal number 4 for education, there are 10 targets for that education SDG. 7 of them are targets, 3 of them are means of implementation. You take those 7 targets, 5 of the 7 are about learning outcomes and skills. And so the indicators that are developed alongside those targets are emphasizing learning outcomes, and the international community is looking for a means of measuring progress against these indicators. And I would highlight indicator 4.1.1, which is levels of proficiency in reading and mathematics at the end of primary and at the end of lower secondary. And the end of lower secondary, that's PISA. And so we see this PISA for Development and PISA together as a major contribution towards the measurement on a global scale of progress towards that indicator. And when we look at 2018, taking all the countries in PISA, all the countries in PISA for Development, it will be 90 countries taking part in PISA in 2018. And we have enough countries lined up to come into PISA from 2021. It'll be something like 110, 115 countries in PISA. And so this is, I don't know, 90% of the world's population probably covered by PISA at that point. So those are the three drivers. So the experience of the countries and their demand, the OECD strategy on development, and the development of the SDGs and the focus on learning outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Now, progress on the pilot. The OECD's PISA for Development is now in the middle of lots of pilot studies, right?
No, there's not lots of pilot studies.
No, not lots of.
No, it's just
Our
one.
Yes, because some participants are asking, how are you selecting countries to implement pilot studies, because they want to be part of the OECD now.
We would welcome them too.
Yeah.
It's one pilot, one study, but of course it's taking place in 7 countries.
7 countries.
And those countries are Cambodia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Paraguay, Senegal, and Zambia. That's 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have an 8th country, Panama, who will take part in just the out-of-school 15-year-old component.
Just the out-of-school.
Yeah. The Panama are doing PISA 2018, and then they will also do the out-of-school component of PISA for Development.
I heard that those teachers, in Panama, are now writing some test items for the PISA for Development.
No, maybe for PISA, not for PISA.
I'll send you the article.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So where we are in the project is those 7 countries have all signed participation agreements. So that's the fundamental condition of participation in PISA or PISA development, that a country signs an agreement to implement PISA in accordance with technical standards and the protocols regarding security of items, all the rest of that. So those 7 countries have signed. We are working with 11 development partners who are funding this, as well as the country's own contributions. The countries are all making their own financial contributions, plus 11 development partners. Plus we have 9 technical partners, including UNESCO and UNICEF and the Global Partnership for Education, plus the other international assessments. Where we are in terms of project implementation is that the frameworks, reading, maths and science, are ready, they're prepared, and the tests are prepared, and the background questionnaires are prepared, and the countries are now in the process of adapting and translating those instruments for a field trial, which will take place in the months this year, September, October, November, December. Cambodia will be the last country to do the field trial in December. That's for the PISA standard grades, grade 7 and above. And then in January, February, March, April 2017, we do the field trial for the out-of-school component, the 15-year-olds below grade 6, the 15-year-olds who are out of school altogether. We spend the rest of 2017 analysing the field trial results and adjusting the instruments, making any necessary changes. And then we go back to do the main data collection in the 7 countries towards the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. and we will be publishing national reports with each of the countries towards the end of 2018 or early 2019. We're still finalizing that strategy. So people watching us today, they should be looking out for the results of this project towards the end of 2018, early 2019. But the impact of this project on main PISA is already happening. So the innovations we've introduced in terms of, and this is where your question about selection comes in. So a condition of entry to PISA development is that a country will undergo a capacity needs analysis. And so that is a very thorough piece of work. And again, if you go to our website, people can see the reports of those capacity needs analysis are all there. And then the countries have to agree to developing a capacity building plan that identifies any needs. So basically the capacity needs analysis is taking the PISA technical standards and then applying those to the countries. And we're looking at evidence that the country has the necessary capacity to implement according to the technical standards. Any gaps that we identify, we are then addressing through the capacity building plan. And so there, the OECD's contractors and the OECD itself, plus other experts that we employ, are going to the countries and working with them, and the countries are coming to international meetings for training, development, and being given guidance. Then the country also has to develop and agree a project implementation plan, which basically lays out how the country will implement the PISA cycle at each stage of implementation, the in-country budget that will be necessary, the human resources that will need to be deployed, the institutional arrangements. So those, if you like, are the three conditions of entry, and these are innovations that we're also bringing to PISA now. So if a country is coming into PISA, has not had experience of a large-scale assessment before, is joining for the first time, then we will offer them the opportunity to have these capacity needs assessment.
Let me just go through the three conditions: that the financial requirement, and also the capacity, the country's capacity to carry out, and then also to agree with the plan for the implementation. Those are three.
we never turn anybody away. But
good news.
You know, if you are a country with limited experience of assessment, then PISA is it's quite a complex, technically rigorous assessment, and so we have to be assured that the countries coming into PISA have the capacity to implement. If they don't have the capacity to implement, we can provide capacity building and help a country, and that is a big incentive for countries coming into PISA, that by participating they will help to build their capacity both for implementing PISA but also for implementing their own national assessments. There is a lot of spillover of the capacity we build that benefits the national assessments as well. So to answer your question about selection, we never selected anybody. The countries came to us. And then when the countries came to us, we said, well, can you finance this? And if they said, well, we can't finance all of it, then we worked with their development partners to try and put a package together that would enable them to do it. And some countries came to us and we weren't able to identify a development partner, or development partners said we can't help. That happened with these three countries. So there are, they're not conditions, but there are three things that you must have to basically take part in PISA. They're not our conditions; they're just the reality. So your leadership of your education sector, your minister, must want this to happen, and then the institution responsible for assessment in the country. So normally that's a unit of the Ministry of Education, but it could be a standalone institution. That institution must also be willing to do the assessment, and they must be either having the capacity or the willingness to build the capacity to implement. And then thirdly, the finance must be available to make it happen. Now, as I say, finance, like I said earlier, relative to what a country spends on its education system, we're talking the tiniest amount. But certainly what we are learning from the experience of the middle-income countries is, even though relatively it is such a tiny, tiny amount, it is a very difficult thing for a country to finance. There are lots of reasons for this. I think partly it is the institutional structures of country budgets. Assessment is quite a new thing. So countries have always had examinations, but they haven't really had assessments. And I think the structures of a lot of education budgets in countries, not just developing countries, middle-income countries, they don't have a line that says assessment. It's not there. And to introduce new lines into a recurrent budget is, I think, very difficult. And in developing countries, the development budget, the development budget is largely a mechanism for development partner funding. So you can introduce a line in that budget for assessment if a development partner is ready to finance it. But the key thing for us is sustainability. And we want countries not to just come into PISA and go out again. We want them to stay for a prolonged
period. To build the
period.
institutional capacity.
And to be able to track their progress over time. And so that requires a line on the recurrent budget, assessment, participation in international assessment, whatever. And that, I think, is a challenge in certain countries to be able to make those kind of structural changes.
Okay, great. Now, I just received several more questions. Do we still have time? Yes. Okay. Pisa Shock. Can you further explain the Pisa Shock and how it has affected the way countries carry out assessments? Does it affect both PISA and PISA for development? Well, PISA for development, PISA for development, we still don't have Pisa Shock. Pisa Shock is actually the PISA.
I think the biggest Pisa Shock was the first one, PISA 2000, especially in Germany. And then
in Japan.
In Japan too, yes. So there are several
in Germany as well.
In many countries. But how the country reacted is quite different. So some country revisit the curriculum, or some country change the way of assessing students, and some country change the structure of education itself, so that change the selection age and they make it older than before, and so on. So there are several ways of responding to PISA results. And what PISA is good at, or PISA is the tool for the international benchmarking. So PISA is good at finding out what is going on in your own country, and also find out what is going on in other countries. But PISA is not the tool for finding out what should work. So that PISA doesn't tell each country that you should do this. Each country using PISA data with other evidence, like more longitudinal study or more in-depth qualitative study or randomized experimental control trial, and all those stuff, all combined, country decide what to do, and then it quite varies. There's no uniform way of reform.
Great. Another question.
Yes. On this question of shock. See, shock comes when you're not prepared.
So you should be prepared for the shock.
And that is again a lesson that we are taking on board with PISA for Development. So with our 7 PISA for Development countries, we are investing a lot of time and effort at the beginning of the cycle, 3 years before the results, to help the countries to prepare their populations. So we are off on Saturday to Honduras. And I don't know if anybody out there is in Honduras, but if you are, we will be in the president's house on Tuesday morning with the president and with the Minister of Education, and we will be launching Honduras's participation in PISA for Development. And if you are in Panama City on the 22nd of April, 22nd of April. Not you personally, anybody out there. If they are in Panama City, we will be launching Panama's participation in PISA and PISA for Development there too. And these launches have taken place in all of the countries. So again, some of you, if you are in Ecuador, you would have seen us last year there, and in Senegal last year there, and Guatemala and Paraguay. These launches are taking place, we call them a launch because it's launching the participation, but we are preparing the populations of those countries for PISA participation, and as part of these launches we are sharing with them the results of their neighbors, particularly their neighbors in their regions, what their results have been like, and then we're talking to principals of schools, teachers unions, civil society, academics, and then the national centers in the countries are continuing those conversations all the way through the cycle, so that people are prepared, so that there then isn't a shock when the results, the national report is produced. People know, oh, okay, we were ready for this. Okay, we know this. Yeah, that's,
yeah.
And PISA's impact is not only the performance score itself, but other stuff such as student motivation or student anxiety towards mathematics, those kind of attitude or motivational aspects. PISA can tell the situation in that country. So when we talk about shock, it's not only about performance, but it includes everything.
Other things, yeah. Okay. Another person is actually, you just mentioned the word impact, but then you are actually not measuring the impact of the study, but how are you tracking the impact?
We are interested, and again, I go back to that report we published on the experience of middle-income countries. There is a whole chapter in that report about the impact of PISA on those countries' education systems and their policies.
So, okay, all of us are going to read the famous report now.
Yes.
Now, PISA is a mirror, not a makeup artist. Do you agree with this statement? This is just came in, the question.
I think that's you.
Okay,
you know about makeup.
PISA is a mirror, not a makeup artist.
Meaning that we don't tell the country what to do. Is it
I don't know.
Mirror, it's a mirror to show that what is going on in that system. Yes.
Yeah. And what could be possible? What could be possible
by showing other countries example. Yes.
Okay.
PISA shows what is possible.
PISA shows what is possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember when I was growing up, I was talking to Miyako earlier, in England, there was a feeling that some kids can do maths and some kids can't. You were born able to do maths, and that's just so much baloney. And you can see now with the evidence from PISA of countries, Shanghai and Singapore and Japan, that all kids can do maths. It's a question of the right teachers doing the right things. All kids can do maths. So that's holding the mirror, and it's exploding some of the myths that grow up in education.
Okay, great. Now, I think we need to finish that. Is there any final pitch, that's some very important message to our audience from PISA and PISA for Development?
So from PISA, PISA 2015 result will be released 6th of December this year. And then some of the results, including the collaborative problem solving, will be released the following year, 2017. So I'm looking forward to sharing all those results.
Me too, yes. From PISA for Development.
Yeah, so those of you that are in the countries that we're working in, we hope that you will come along to some of the events. There will be many public events over these 3 years leading up to the production of the results. So if you're in those countries, please engage with us. And we look forward to seeing you when we are there. And then for people who are in other developing countries who are not in PISA yet, I think it's pretty certain that we're already talking to your ministries, your governments. And so again, if you have an opportunity to encourage your countries to join PISA, I hope you will do that. We certainly want them to join.
All right. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. And now we are going to have 2 more Hangouts next week. So please stay tuned and watch for the messages that you're going to receive next week. All right. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.